This episode of the My Latin Life podcast is brought to you by Language Blend, the new best way to learn Spanish. Language Blend focuses on what you actually need to live and get by abroad with daily one-on-one lessons, a dedicated texting partner. It's like living in a Spanish-speaking country without ever leaving home. Go to languageblend.com for more information. Welcome back to the My Latin Life podcast. Since 2014, My Latin Life has been your trusted guide to traveling and living in Latin America. My guest today is Steven Steers. He's a marketer and part-time comedian based in Mexico City. Steven, how's it going?
It goes all right today, man. But as you can hear, my voice is gravelly and sexy like a late night DJ, but that's not on purpose. The volcano here in Mexico City has exploded a few days ago and has left me quite under the weather. We may even have to evacuate. So for that, and then you're hearing me all gravelly and sexy. I hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, no, I'm kind of liking it. I know you've done a bunch of podcasts in the past, so this one will be different in a couple ways. Not only the voice, but then I think also the material, because most of your podcasts are kind of like sales and marketing oriented. But in this one, we're going to get into some more kind of expat type stuff.
Let's go, man. I'm excited. I don't get to talk about this stuff enough.
Well, dude, tell me about this this volcano eruption, because I saw some stuff on Twitter, but I didn't know it was really affecting people in Mexico City that bad.
Yeah, man. I think it erupted, or the first eruption was sometime early last week or so, and then it just threw a bunch of ash into the air. So it's actually located in Puebla, which I want to say is about an hour or two from Mexico City,
Hmm.
and it's caused lots of school closures. It's having people stay at home, and then it's starting to flow lava and produce more ash. And they've actually grounded a number of flights in Mexico City, so you can't even fly out as of this weekend. So we're very, very close to it being red alert, where they're going to evacuate people out of the city, which is nuts, nuts.
Yeah, yeah. And I know some people might be listening to this maybe months in advance and it might not be relevant, but it is kind of a recurring theme, right? Like this does happen once in a while.
Yeah, the volcano will occasionally do its thing. It's usually not as bad as it is today, but the air in Mexico City is quite well known for being somewhat polluted and gross. So, because we're at elevation, I think it's about 7,000 feet, but we're in a valley at elevation. So all of the car exhaust or anything else that comes into the area doesn't leave because there's no wind that hits it. So for a good portion of the year, it can be a little bit dirty and gross, but it is still one of the best cities I've ever lived in, ever, 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 and it's still my favorite. Find
Yeah,
something
yeah.
you love and let it kill you, right? That's the old adage.
Yeah, that applies pretty well across the board in Latin America, I think. Um,
For sure, right? That's like too real.
you say that again, I gotta remember that.
Just find something you love and let it kill you, man.
Oh,
Yep.
good. And is it really like, is the volcano that bad? Like, obviously, most people are aware of normal Mexico City pollution, and it can, even make your nose run a little bit. But with this volcano, is it really like stay indoors, sky is like dark gray, or what's going on?
There's a little bit of grayness. It's also the rainy season here currently, so we're recording this in the end of May. It's usually somewhat gray in the afternoon, so nothing is particularly crazy on that front. But if you were to check your Air app, so my brother lives here as well, and he has pretty bad asthma, so he makes sure to check the apps, and like it's really, really high on the scale of dangerous. If you were to look at the apps for the quality of the air, so it's high
Mm.
particles, and as you can hear, like that's affected my voice. Like I lost my voice a couple days ago, and I'm finally speaking again, but it's tough. It's tough right now,
Yeah. Could
definitely.
you could you recommend that air app, please?
I think it's Air IQ, I
Air
believe.
IQ.
Or
Okay.
you can even look on if you have an iPhone and you check the weather app, you could check any of those and that'll tell you what the air quality is. It's on a scale.
IQ Air Visual.
I think that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's like a light blue logo.
I believe so. Yep.
Okay. Okay. I've
White
never
with
used one of
blue.
these actually. Interesting. Things things Mexico City people do. Okay. But
one of the
yeah,
many.
so I mean, tell us about Mexico City and actually your background, how you ended up here. And apologies if you've recounted this in other podcasts before, but I think this time it'll have a new spin to it.
This is the time it matters, fans. This is the time it matters. So I'm originally from New York City, and I'm a consultant and marketer and everything else. And I would usually be doing a fair amount of traveling. But when the pandemic stuff kicked off, New York just became completely insufferable. So I'd lived abroad for like a month or two here and there in stretches, traveled all over South America, Europe, and New York was just like, you know what, I'm done with this. So I unsubscribed and I moved to Playa del Carmen, Mexico in the end of 2020, and I've been in Mexico since
Nice.
then. So I'm about to be 3 years here. So why abroad was a couple of reasons. Mexico City in particular, from the first time I came here in 2008, I was like, this place is weird. It's wild. It's got a vibe to it. And I came back here again a few times, and it always just kind of stuck with me. If you've been here, like if anyone who's been here is listening, it just has this vibe to it. I can't really explain it. In Spanish, you'll say it has la ciudad tiene su encanto. It has its enchantment, its magic. Something about this place just grabs me, and it feels like home. And since then, I was just like, I have to move here at some point. So 2019, I was like, all right, I'm going to move. And then I met a woman and I stayed in New York. And then 2020 came around and we busted up and I was like, all right, it's time to go. So Playa del Carmen was open during the pandemic, meaning you could go outside
Hmm.
and like there
Hmm.
was beaches and sun and, there's not as many people as New York. So it just kind of was an obvious choice to just wait things out. And then eventually I just got so bored of the beach people who just want to sit down on a beach all day. And when they're like, why don't you come to brunch on Tuesday? And it's like, what? I have to work. They're like, what's this work thing? So just being around that type of energy got really annoying because I have ambition and I love cities and I'm a city kid. So when something popped up here in Mexico City, it was a very easy yes to come and move here. And I felt at home ever since, outside of the not being able to breathe on occasion.
Yeah, yeah. So you don't do like 6 months Playa, 6 months Mexico City or anything. You're like full time Mexico City.
If I never go back to Playa again, it'll be too soon. I just think there's just nothing, there's no culture there. So, like, to be frank and direct here, I didn't move to another country to have the same things that I have in my country. I think that's a really silly way to do it. Again, you want some amenities, you want great internet, you probably want like some certain things that are similar, but I want a cultural experience. That's why I'm here. So Playa del Carmen has nothing cultural at all to it. I mean, there's some places you can get some Mayan stuff or whatever, like here and there in very small pockets, but it was a lot more work for me to speak Spanish there than it was in New York City, which
Mm.
is just a big thumbs down for that region. Again, there's some beautiful things. I met some really nice people, but there's just nothing there for me culturally or work wise, or and there's no people with ambition for by and large. So not hating on it, just it's not for me.
Yeah, yeah. I spent a lot of time in Playa myself. Certainly a couple months at the start of 2021. I usually do like 2, 3 months and then pop in, pop out.
You
Uh,
got
but, uh,
it. You knew
but but
exactly what it
but
was.
but overall, I've spent a fair amount of time there. Um, I think a lot of people come away with a similar impression. I generally have a positive impression of Playa, but we don't have to make it a Playa debate. So that's cool. And then, so when did you move to Mexico City?
I've been here about a year now. This round, yeah. But before the pandemic, I was living here for like a month every year, just because I loved it,
Nice.
and I could be remote. So why be somewhere you don't want to be?
Yeah. And I usually at the start of the episode I try to tie in how our, the person I'm speaking to knows the other guests. And you got introduced to me by Freddie Lansky, another longtime Mexico City resident, Freddie and Murph.
Shout out
And
to
so
Frederick. I call him Frederick. He hates it, but it's his name. So hi, Frederick.
that's good. So Freddie was one of our first podcast guests, I think episode number 4. And people can go look that up. Freddie knows a lot of people, and I was in Mexico City for a month at the start of 2023. We were hanging out, babysitting Murph, going for a couple of drinks in Condesa, where he brings his dog into the bar with him. It was a good time.
Classic Freddie. Yeah, Freddie's a good dude, man, and Murph's awesome.
And then the other connection is you're a member of the Dynamite Circle, which has a pretty good contingent in Mexico, and particularly Mexico City. It's an entrepreneurial community. They have an event in Mexico City, right? You can confirm. I forget how they call it, like DC
Uh,
CDMX. No, something like that.
DC Max, it's called. Yeah. And I actually
DC
just
Max.
recently spoke at the one we had in April, which was super dope. Yeah, man, if you're a traveler and you're looking for good communities of like-minded individuals and you're a business person, I think you'd be hard pressed to find a better community than the Dynamite Circle. It's got the dopest people I've ever met in and outside of business, and just the conversations you have. Like, there's no fluff to it, and people really want to build interesting and amazing things. And what I think is also really great about the community, like you've spoken to Dan, maybe you've met Ian and you know Freddie, like there's no hierarchy inside of the community. I don't know how to explain that. It's just if you want to build a great business that supports a great lifestyle and you're a good person, come hang out. Like that's pretty much what it is. There's no like, oh, we have to be this way or that way. It's just people are so giving. Like I'm almost taken aback sometimes. So check it out if you're interested.
Yeah, yeah. I want to continue on this thread of entrepreneurs in Mexico City, but just a footnote for people. Ian and Dan are the founders of the Dynamite Circle. Dan Andrews was another podcast guest, so people can go look at the Dan Andrews episode. Actually, one of my personal favorites that I did. I've never actually spoken to Ian, but funny, just kind of the loop here. I remember Ian did a month in Playa del Carmen, like way back before it was popular. Like I'm talking maybe 2015, 2016. I'm not sure.
Wow.
And he spoke about it on a Tropical MBA episode way back in the day. And I remember listening to that, and then that put it kind of on my radar. And that's one of the reasons I actually ended up in Playa to begin with, was because I heard about it through Ian and the Tropical MBA, and I said, "Oh, well, I guess there's a community there. Let's go check it out." And that's a whole other story. But yeah, people can go check that out.
Definitely worth a listen. Those guys got a wealth of knowledge.
Yeah, definitely OGs. Well, dude, tell me about this event because I haven't actually got a chance to speak to Freddie in depth about it. I know he was there and he said it was an absolute whirlwind of a week. How did the event go?
It went awesome. So slight difference is I've been to a few of these events now. This is the first I've spoken at. So as a speaker, I spent most of my time getting ready to speak so I could add a lot of value to people. I think I had probably 60 or so different entrepreneurs come in and hear my talk, which was awesome. I had a great time. I got great feedback. But these events are always a whirlwind. I think there's like 200 or so or people who show up, and like you're up really early in the morning and you're talking to people all day. You're going to the parties at night. You barely sleep. You do it again over and over and over, and it's exhausting and it's exactly what I want. So I highly recommend it to anybody. Yeah, just the connections you get, man. There's we're increasingly becoming more and more digital, and especially if you're a digital entrepreneur and you digital nomad, you travel a lot. You spend a lot of time alone, but there's nothing like in-person FaceTime with people of like minds. Like it's very much worth the investment. And another quick thing, we may get to this in more depth in a second, but with the DC in particular, it's such a well-established group. I want to say there's like 1,500 or 2,000 members globally, and there's a WhatsApp group for every city that you might even want to go to if you're an entrepreneur. And then there's a group meeting every month called the Junto, where you can go and meet those people in that city, like-minded, and they can give you
Mm.
resources and stuff like this. So as far as like being able to land almost any city in the world, you probably have a person in the community who's of like mind, who can give you resources and help plug you into other things and make your transition to all these new countries that much smoother. And you can't even pay for that in some ways, plays, right? You have to have earned a space in that. So very grateful to be part of that community.
And do you know for Mexico, do they have communities for different cities in Mexico?
For sure. So I've done the Playa one, I've done the Mexico City one. I think those are the two biggest hubs we have here. There may be some others on the west coast of Mexico, but those very robust. Like our WhatsApp groups are probably into the hundreds for each. So you'll have people who come and visit, and they'll stay in the group, and then they'll probably come back when they're traveling around. You have ones for Sao Paulo, Brazil. You have Argentina, multiple cities. You have all over the U.S. everywhere in Europe, Portugal, Spain. Yeah, we got people everywhere, man. Thailand, Bangkok, Chiang Mai. Like, yeah, you'd be hard pressed to not be able to find someone in the DC in almost any city in the world.
Yeah, yeah. I'd actually be curious what maybe the full list in Mexico is. Like, is there a Guadalajara one? Is there a Vallarta one? Do you know?
I don't know if there's Guadalajara isn't super big in the DC as far as I know. And it's also just not like a lot of people don't really go to Guadalajara. It has some of the prettiest women in Mexico if you're curious, but it is not as developed, I would say, in Mexico City for like this type of lifestyle, in my opinion, just because it's a little bit more difficult to get to. It's smaller. You have to drive everywhere. It's just not built the same way. So as far as I know, I'm not sure if we have much representation there, but I can definitely let you know on the back end.
Yeah, yeah, fair enough. Well, tell us a little bit more about the event. I mean, what was your talk about?
My talk was about building and coaching a non-salesy sales team. So I'm a sales consultant by trade. I've worked with probably 700 or something different companies from 30 or more different countries on all things sales, whether through workshops, advisement, or otherwise. And I took some of the learnings that I've had from that time in a almost decade in sales and distilled that down to help some of these entrepreneurs talk about and figure out how to build sales teams that are going to stay at their company. I think that's the key. So I started my talk with a story about myself as a sales rep at a startup in New York City, and then they were doing some downsizing, and I was one of the people who got downsized. And I walk into the room, the head of HR comes in with my manager, and they tell me all this stuff like, hey, it's been fun, but it's time to go. And as I walk out of the meeting, I see one of the founders, and I go to shake his hand and say, hey, thanks. And he just kind of blew me off. And I was like, all right, well, I guess, I worked at the company for a couple of years. And I was like, that's weird, but, on the way. So I walk out. They turned off my company email and everything else. I said my goodbyes to certain people. And then I checked my personal email, like on the train home, and I see an email from this guy. And his email basically says, hey, dude, I spilled some coffee on myself. So I'm really sorry about that. But I wanted to let you know that you got the short end of the stick a lot here with respect to territory, vertical, and management. Too little, too late for sure, but apologies nonetheless. Hope your experience here was generally good outside of that. With the right support, you can and will be an excellent seller should you choose to continue in that capacity. In any case, good luck with whatever comes next. I'm happy to be a reference if you need one. So I started with that as the general framework of just don't be a founder like that. So people really resonated with that because one thing we have to always realize, especially if you're an entrepreneur, right? You're hiring people to work with you. They're trusting you with their career as much as you're trusting them with their company.
Mm,
So I think being able to build that parity and to build certain systems inside of your company that help you find really good and talented people who want to work for you, build systems that enable you to qualify people out of working for you, and then also being able to make sure you have, when you do find those good people, how to make sure that they stay because you've accounted for them being in your company. And I have many roles I've been in where people just haven't, and they're like, hey, yeah, you're going to figure it out. And I mean, maybe I can, but I'm not going to make the money that we all talked about having. So we haven't set expectations. So the talk was a lot about that. And I got some really good feedback on it, man. And I'm grateful for the opportunity.
yeah. And did you say that your experience there was how not to do it because the fact that you actually got a pretty nice sounding email was better than how it goes for most people.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it sounds nice, but it really, to me, it just reeks of lack of leadership. So somebody whose company it is, I worked there for years. It's not like I was there for a couple of weeks or something. He knew that I was getting the short end of the stick with everything. And then he knew I had bad management, but he didn't do anything about it. That's why that's a bad email. Like you could have done something about this and you chose to not do anything about it. That's a terrible email, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I guess he was trying to console you
Yeah, but I
instead of
mean, it's no consolation. Like you just wasted years of my life. Like there's no consolation for that. But again, like I'm not mad about it anymore. I think looking at it, it's one of the best things that ever happened to me because it set me on the path that I'm on. Right. So what I really do as my main function, right, and I can work online, right, which is cool because I was working in an office back in those days, is I provide the support that I didn't have when I was in that position. So founders like that need the support that I provide. And that's a great jumping off point to provide some context for how people think about things. So, like I said, when somebody works at your company, they're trusting you with their career just as much as you are trusting them with your company. There needs to be some parity there and accountability on both sides. And in the case of this particular founder, there was no accountability for that, even though he was aware of what was happening. And I think there's no excuse for that. And I don't think any founder should act that way. So
Yeah.
that's why I'm on the path I'm on. And I'm grateful for him for his lack of accountability because it enabled me to do what I'm doing today.
Yeah, that's fair. And then how did that change how you approached your next job?
So I've always wanted to work remote. I think from back in 2010, I thought it was the coolest thing. I think I read the 4 Hour Work Week like most people. And I was like, yo, is this possible? Really? You can do this? And then I remember being at that same job here and I was working in sales, right? So if a salesperson hits you up for some information and you work in the company, that usually means, hey, I need this to close a deal. I'm not just having a conversation with you. And so I remember sending a request for some very techie question I couldn't answer to one person or even to my manager. I can't remember. But I do remember the interaction. And I sent it to him at like 8:30 in the morning. I was in the office early. And then it was like 4 in the afternoon. And I was like, there's no answer. Like, what the hell? Like, let me go see if I find this person. So I go down to their department and I see them like hanging out, having a coffee. And I was like, uh, don't mean to interrupt, but just really quick, like, did you see my message? I really would love that information as quick as you can. Is it possible to get it? And the guy got super vexed with me, and he's like, I saw your message. I'll respond to your message when I feel like responding to your message. And I was like, all right, cool, go back. And I just remember going back to my desk and thinking, I was like, why the hell am I sitting in this office waiting for these people to do stuff? If I'm just going to send you a message, why do I have to sit with these people who don't want to be here either? I can just work online. So I just remember having that in my mind as like I talked to people through I think it was Join Me at that time, which is a precursor to before Zoom came up really hard. It's like I'm talking to people online conferences, I'm sending emails. I rarely go have an in-person meeting. And then we sit down and have meetings that we could have that could be emails. Like, this is stupid. This is really silly. So uh, at that point, after I got downsized from there, I remember having a conversation with another friend who introduced me into my first remote gig, which was dope. So that I didn't have to go into the office and like I could just really concentrate. So I was still working in New York, but I was not having to go into an office, which was really, really dope. So from there, getting permission from the managers because I was running sales, it was like, can I travel? Can I do whatever else? And they didn't really care too much. So I started to get on the path of doing that. Unfortunately, the company built their whole platform on Facebook, and then Facebook changed the algorithm. So we were basically out of business, and they laid everyone off, most people off, after like 7 months of me being there, which was so 2 jobs 1 year, which sucked like badly, very very tough time. But fortunately, again, like you can only line things up in reverse, right? So they'd hired at that second company, my first remote job, they'd hired a sales consultant to work with us to help us scale sales. And I got along very well with this guy. They just kind of threw me into him like, hey, you show up to his sessions, he's going to help you build everything we're building. So I developed a great relationship with this guy. And after I got the axe, I sent him an email and I said, hey, man, I just got the axe here. Just wanted to say thanks for all your help. You've been amazing. I look forward to figuring out how to work with you at some point in the future. And God bless him. His name is Scott Sambucci, still one of my favorite people in the entire world. Check out Scott. He's like, dude, let me see if I can help you figure out what's next for you. Let's hop on a call. So we talk. A 2 hour conversation ends with, hey, so I have a job for someone like you if you want it. And then that got me into sales consulting. So I was working with startups instead of in startups. And Scott really helped accelerate my learning because he saw I was hungry for it. And that really completely changed my life. And I think one of the keys to his philosophy that I think more people should adopt is he said, results equal results. So I don't care where you are. I don't care how long it takes you. I want you to get the results that we're here to get. And again, remote work is not for everybody. Some people can't handle it. But that type of philosophy is why Scott does well and is why we resonate so well together. It's like, I'm going to do what it takes to get this done because I want to live a certain type of lifestyle. If I got to work overnight and while I'm living in Germany, or I got to work overnight while I'm living in Thailand, I still get to live in Thailand. And I'm still going to go here and produce even more because I get to do this other thing. So I think For
Mm.
people who are thinking about remote stuff or otherwise, and why some people hate remote stuff is most people just want the lifestyle but aren't willing to work to have the lifestyle. And where how I am and how I got to where I am, I think, is because I prioritized my work around the lifestyle I wanted to lead, and that's been one of the keys to being able to do what I'm doing and live abroad without much trouble.
Hey guys, quick break from the episode to tell you about BitRefill. BitRefill allows you to shop online and in person without banks, converting your crypto directly into merchant balance. We're talking gift cards to Nike, Amazon, Apple, Airbnb, Hotels.com, and many more, all paid for with crypto. BitRefill offers more than 10,000 gift card options in 180 countries, including the USA, Canada, all across Latin America, including Brazil, Colombia, Mexico, Argentina, El Salvador, and many more. You can also apply the code MyLatinLife at checkout to get 10% back on your first purchase. Go to bitrefill.com for more information. Yeah, so many little nuggets there. And then, so what year was this that you got your first remote job?
2017.
2017. Quite early.
Mm-hmm. I guess before it was trendy.
And was it something you made it seem like it fell in your lap, but was it something that you really had to have a vision and you specifically worked towards it, or did it kind of happen accidentally?
I think it was a lot of both, right? Like I put it out. So this is one thing too, right? We could talk about the woo woo stuff of Playa del Carmen, like people manifest and whatever else,
The secret.
but right, the secret exactly. And I think to some degree that works, but right, if I don't remember where the quote comes from, but if you want something bad enough and you let the universe know, it conspires to help you. I think that's in The Alchemist actually. So I think being vocal about the things that you really want from your life and telling more people about that and what you're up to helps people point that opportunity towards you. So I'd spoken with one of my good friends who knew the founder of that company that had a remote company. And he knew what I was up to. He knew what I was good at. And he put me in front of that guy because he knew what I was looking for. So I was already on my path of looking for other things myself, but I got the direct intro. And as you know, like, right, I got introduced to you. I might have been able to pitch you about being on your podcast, but it wouldn't carry the same weight as if one of your good guests was like, hey, talk to this guy, right? That works in any field across the board. So I got a warm introduction to that founder. And then my skill set matched well with the stage of the company. And the rest is history.
Hmm. So you've been a sales coach kind of for like almost a decade.
A little less than that, probably like 6 years, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Six,
yeah. So
7 years.
sales rep and then to sales coach.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a couple of different threads, but I wanted to pick up on just like a funny one. I almost want to like recraft this as a tweet, but you said
Go
that
for
like
it.
even when you're working in person, a lot of the work is really kind of remote work anyway, or
Exactly.
asynchronous work, where you're basically just waiting on an email from some guy down the hall.
Yep. It's asinine, and I had to commute an hour each way to go sit in this office and wait for you to email me. Come on, bro. So stupid.
Yeah, I never heard it said quite like that piece of it, but that's kind of funny and true. Like, it's not really like everyone's like super collaborating. You're all just kind of doing your own thing still.
No, you book a conference room for that one long meeting that probably should have been an email when we come down to it because one person's talking the entire time and we're not solving any problems. Like, again, I'm hating on office work because I did it for so long, but largely speaking, I think there's, let me pull a hair back here. So people don't know how to communicate in general. People are very, very poor at communicating their ideas, which is why things take so long to happen in most cases. And so, if people worked on their communication, they would start to get clearer on how to be more pithy with the things they say. So, I'll give you another example. At
And
the
what's
start of the
pithy again? Sorry.
pithy is very just short and direct, no fat
Okay,
on a
got it.
statement, right?
Got it.
It's
Continue.
a $3 word maybe, but with low letters in it. But I'll give you the quick example. So my voice is struggling right now. I wasn't able to speak from Friday till today, and today's Monday, so I didn't talk for over 2 days. And having to sit in a space where you can't talk really forces you to economize your communication. So I have to be very choosy about when I'm going to communicate because I won't be able to say anything. I have to think very clearly. I'm going to point at this object. I'm going to make these finger gestures. I'm going to give this much eye contact, or I'm going to bring this thing over, or I'm going to write this thing down so I can get the thing done and we can both solve the problem quickly. Having to sit in that is a beautiful experience. It was really annoying to start with, but coming out of it today, it's like there's so much joy and room in very direct statements. And most people aren't direct anymore because they're moving around all these different topics they're not allowed to say, or they don't want to offend somebody, which, is okay to some degree. But these things take so much longer because we can't get to the point. And I think people could do with some study of how to communicate our ideas better so that we can hear both sides of an issue and make a decision on the outcomes we all want to get to. And I don't see that happening a lot in office culture because there's all these silly politics that don't enable people to get actual work done. And so if we're going to have politics, that's fine, but at least let me be in a place in the world where I want to enjoy it while I deal with those politics instead of paying out the ass for New York rent. But that's my story.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Uh, yeah, and one piece of the story I wanted to weave in as well, because we'll get to more expat things. I also do want to get some sales nuggets out of you. I mean, we'll touch on a bunch of stuff, but when did comedy become a thing for you? Were you going to the New York comedy clubs at night around this point?
I did some comedy in New York here and there, but if you've ever been to New York, it's just a big grind. And I thought it was very stupid to stay up till 3 or 4 in the morning to get a spot for 5 minutes to hopefully tell a joke. I just thought that was dumb. I was like, there's got to be a better way to it.
Mm,
So I've been writing for years and years and years. I've had many notebooks with like things I thought were funny, and then I just kind of would write sketches and other things I thought were good, and I'd hold on to them. And then when I moved to Playa del Carmen, one of my other DC friends, who's been a comedian for a long time, said he was starting a show, and we were talking. And I was like, "Oh yeah, I've done comedy before." He's like, "You're on the show," and so basically, since I've moved back to Mexico, I've been doing it very, very consistently every week for the past like almost 3 years, and I've just fallen back in love with it again. It's kind of like, sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead, go ahead.
I was just gonna say like I think a lot of people are the biggest fear people have is public speaking, right? Death is number two, and then I don't know where you would put stand up comedy in that realm, somewhere between one and two. Being funny is not an easy is an easy thing to do, but I recommend any entrepreneur or any digital nomad do it, and here's why. It can work out one of two ways. Either you suck and you're like, hey, I could do better, so you do it again, or you don't suck and you're like, hey, I want to try that again. I think those are the only ways it works. And why I think that's really important, especially if you're an entrepreneur, is you have to sit in that space when things are going well and not going well in a business sense. But when you're doing in comedy, you have to stand on that square and own your perspective in everything you're doing. So I think for any person who wants to build something, you have to believe in yourself enough to see it through to the moment. And I think you get a very concise, pithy, to use the word again, version of that when you're on stage for 5 minutes trying to make people laugh. You know very well immediately if it works or if it doesn't. And then you get to say, hey, you know what? I think I could do better. I want to try it again. And that's what it takes to be successful in anything, and especially in business.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm at a crux point as an interviewer because I'm sure some listeners are like, dude, he was just about to tell us the sales insights of how to sell. And then some people want to hear about what it's like to do stand-up comedy in Mexico. Um, so I think we're already kind of there. I think I already kind of went down one path. You know what's funny? What I was thinking is like, imagine you're Mexican though, and you're walking into a bar and they're just doing stand-up comedy in English and you're just like, this is it. This is the turning point. Like the gringos have taken the
They've
gringos have
taken
taken over
over.
Mexico.
Yeah, I think there's two sides to that, right? There's it's a niche thing still in Mexico, like comedy in English. There are, unfortunately, fortunately, whichever, depending who you ask, more and more people moving here who speak English. So they have needs too, right? That creates a lot of opportunities and businesses for Mexicans as well. So I think there are the effects on both sides of it. The other thing I would say that's important is there's a lot of room here. This is one of the largest cities in all of Latin America. you're going to get all kinds of people here with all kinds of interests. And so if they can do that while they're here, and that can help feed Mexicans, I don't see there's anything better than that in my 2 cents.
No, for sure. It's just kind of funny. I remember I had an experience where I went to a stand-up comedy show in Mexico City before the pandemic, I think 2019. And I was in the room. I kind of walked in the room by accident. It was like a bar with like multiple rooms, and then in one show there was a comedy room. And I walk in, and basically as soon as I walked in, I was like the only white dude, because this was pre-pandemic when we were a rarer sight. And I could not really speak Spanish at this point, but that dude, he immediately just like, he's like, this is my next thread here, and he just started saying something. He's probably like, este güey no está bien,
Oh,
and
güero. Yeah, he's getting after it.
yeah, but they definitely started making fun of me a little bit, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna bow out of this comedy show.
Yeah, it's fun,
Uh,
man. I love the art form. I love it.
yeah, we used to in Playa. I actually think, I don't even think I've been to a comedy show in Playa, but we used to do trivia a lot.
Yeah, you with Laura. Yep.
Yep, with Laura.
Shout out to Laura Snellgrove, I
Yes,
think. Laura Snellgrove. Shout out
Snellgrove,
to you.
British lady.
Yep.
So that was cool, and that was all in English.
Yeah, there's a big community. Like again, there's groups of expats everywhere, and they have needs and they want entertainment. So like it's the most entrepreneurial thing to provide a space for people to do something they want to do. It's level
Yeah,
one.
definitely like lower stakes, I suppose, doing a comedy show in Playa versus Mexico City. You know what I mean? Like a little less
I think it's
pressure.
about equal. I think it's about
About
equal.
equal. Ooh,
Yeah,
okay.
it's about
Why
equal
about equal?
because I think anybody who comes to a comedy show in general, unless it's someone they've heard of, has low stakes in general. They're just like, this isn't going to be great. So that's what I've seen. The other side of that I think is it's low stakes is you have you have the overarching. You just have to go do your time. So like I'm up there to get better. I want to look like the type of person I am. I record every set that I do. I listen back to it. I rewrite portions that I think are okay, and I go and improve for the next time. So I don't really care about one of them. Every show is kind of low stakes in that respect because it's a learning opportunity, and I can then take what I learned from that and plug it into the next thing, and I improve incrementally. So for me, it's
Mm.
the same thing, and then it's still expats, so they're the same type of person in Playa del Carmen with a slightly different attitude than they are in Mexico City. So not much changes in my opinion.
Yeah. Random side note: do you record it yourself, like just recording your own, like on your own phone in your pocket, or you get someone else to do it?
Yeah, own phone in pocket. Rarely, like if I have a bigger show, I might have somebody put a camera up or something like that. But yep, I just mostly have the audio, and then I'll throw it on my YouTube channel in a private link, and I will listen back to that during my writing session for the day.
Hey everybody, hey everybody. Quick break from the podcast to tell you about Language Blend, the best new way to learn Spanish. Language Blend was co-founded by Jake Nomada, friend of the podcast, decade of experience in Latin America, and Jake and his team, they put everything into this program that they wish they had in terms of how to level up quickly with your Spanish language skills. Because the faster that you can get conversationally fluent in Spanish, the better the experience that you're going to have in Latin America. So go to languageblend.com for more information. Okay. And so, Stephen, I imagine you have to tailor the comedy to, being in Mexico. Or is it kind of like expat in Mexico comedy a little bit, or is it more generic comedy, or I suppose maybe a mix of the two?
It completely depends, man. So it depends what's inspiring me that day. I do write some jokes about being in Mexico. Uh, the fun thing about writing is I could substitute Mexico for any city when I travel somewhere else too, right? So because city life is generally similar, right? There's a lot of parallels. So I look for those type of commonalities in anything that I write where I can substitute and change a story slightly to make it more applicable to the room. But no, I think the key to anything, especially with speaking, comedy, or even business, is reading the room as much as you can. So some jokes land, Some subjects work really, really well, some don't, and you need to note those, and then you plug that back in. But yeah, I think it's more than anything about being able to read the room well.
You definitely could do like some Playa specific jokes or Mexico City specific jokes. Like in Playa, you'd be like, "Yeah, just got over here. Only got robbed by the police twice on the way over," or something like
Only
that.
twice. Yep, that's a low amount. My joke about Playa is I say it's like the video game Grand Theft Auto. You get all
Okay.
these weird characters showing up to help you on your missions, and then they disappear in the video game. And if you ever wonder where they end up, it's on Fifth Avenue in Playa del Carmen. That's where everybody is.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't have to laugh at that, but that's the general concept of the joke.
What lands and what doesn't land? Do you think with have you noticed that might be maybe different than back stateside?
I mean, that joke lands with people in Playa that they recognize it, but dude, every room is completely different. Every single time you do it is completely different, which is super fun. So that's why, like I say, you have to stand on your square and know what your square is. And if people laugh, awesome. If they don't laugh, awesome as well. You learn something. So I think it's just more about standing on the square.
What does that mean to stand on the square?
So stand on the square means this is the space that I occupy with who I am and my ideas. And if somebody doesn't like those ideas, I'm not going to jump to another square and then just throw away all my ideas because someone didn't like it. I'm going to be like, no, here's where I am. What can I learn about this? How can I make this better? Or how do I defend against my ideas to show that that person who doesn't like it is actually the person who's wrong? And I think being able to combat that, that's why I say it's the most entrepreneurial thing you can do is just, hey, here's where I'm at. Here's what I think. Here's what I believe. What do you think about it? And I'm going to stay over here and do this. And I think that's why I keep going back to do it. Plus, it's fun.
Okay, yeah, like hold your frame basically.
Sorry, say that again.
Like holding your frame basically. Frame
Holding your
control.
frame. Another way to say it. Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. So as a comedian, very important to hold the frame.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Are there ways, I'm sure someone's probably asked you this, maybe it's a trite question, but have you found any similarities between sales and stand-up comedy?
Yeah, for I mean for sure. Like you're performing in some way, right? Like you need to read the room. So like going back to that as a concept, if you are in a sale, you need to be doing more listening than you need to be doing anything else. I know that's weird. It's like with comedy, you're just talking to people, but like some of the best advice I got from people is like open with a joke you know that works to get people on your team, get them laughing, and then if you're going to experiment in the middle of the set, and then end with a joke you know that works because they remember the
Mm,
first thing and they remember the end thing, right? Pretty
mm,
standard stuff, but it does make sense. In sales, it's all about solving somebody's problem, and you want to ask them the right type of questions that get them to open up about that problem to show that you are listening to them, right? It's something I always tell people is solve, don't sell. So if I've listened to you and we've uncovered the problem and we've got you committed to wanting to solve that problem, I can share some ways that maybe I could be a person that can help you with that problem. I'm not selling it to you. I'm talking about solving the problem. So I would say they're both similar in that you need to read the room and you need to learn how to say the things that get the room moving in the direction that you want. But it always starts with knowing where you're going to start and where you want to end up. And then if you need to experiment, you're kind of doing your dance in between the front and the end.
yeah, definitely makes sense. Do you think there's things about being in sales that actually harm you in stand-up comedy or that you had to unlearn?
So far, nothing's coming to mind. I think the best thing sales ever gave me in life, and or the best and the worst thing it gave me in life and in stand up comedy is I just don't care. Like I've had some very bad days in sales, bad weeks, bad months, bad quarters in sales. I've had some very bad sets on stage that sucked and like they were very painful. But I can go back home and not care about it a half an hour later because I can go back and do it again. So I think that kind of just, yeah, some days attitude is super helpful to be able to just continue to go do difficult things, which is really good. And then also it's sometimes not great because you're not as You know, you don't have as much. You don't care about things as much. Like, not that I don't care. It's just I don't carry things as deeply as I might have in years past, which I think is generally good. But sometimes that can be like, all right, we're past it, and you can move on.
Yeah,
So
makes
that's good
sense.
and bad.
Let go, don't take it too personal.
Yep.
Got it. And so Mexico City is obviously less expat heavy than Playa del Carmen, so you're definitely rubbing up against locals a lot more. What's the vibe with the stand up comedy shows? Do they try to do them? I'm at like some of them maybe are in all English, but do you go to other ones that are bilingual and it's like one English set and then one Spanish set, stuff like that, or
Yeah, there's a
guys that are
couple.
Spanglish even?
Yeah, I'm one of the Spanglish guys because my Spanish is actually pretty decent, but translating my jokes from English to Spanish is still the phase I'm at with my Spanish comedy. So sorry for the listeners, but there is one show run by a local named Mariana Ramirez from Funny Girl Productions, and she does one that's bilingual. So you'll have a Spanish comic come do English, and you'll have a expat comic come do Spanish, or so on and so forth down the line. And those are kind of fun and interesting and draw a very different crowd than one or the other, which is usually interesting. So a lot of room here with comedy. And one other thing I want to say about that too, why I think there's a lot of opportunity in Latin America. And again, don't come here because we don't need more expats. But in all seriousness, is there's so many different ways to skip the line here. So one of my friends, Melton, says that Mexico City has everything and it needs everything, which I think is a really unique thing for a city of this size because you can't say that about New York. New York has everything and doesn't need anything from anybody. And the fact that Mexico City is that way makes it so much more approachable. So like you can build a huge community of people really fast because they're looking for stuff like that and they're open to it. Versus New York, like you need to know the right person, get the right thing, and move all the right places, and you probably still get two people showing up. There's not that type of level of I say pretentiousness because I am a New Yorker, so I can talk about my city that way. It's just this place still has its soul, and I think that makes it a very nice place for folks when you can breathe here. That is, when you can come out here and share what you create with people because people are hungry for it, which is really cool.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's a cool cultural exchange as well when you get into the bilingual sets and stuff like that, where it really shows kind of the cohesiveness of our two countries.
Yeah, I think so as well. Like one thing I usually, if I get down on expats, it's for the following. It's that there's a certain type of expat, right? Like I mentioned, I want a cultural experience. I didn't come here to live my Brooklyn life. Not exactly anyway, right? So I think when people, for any country I've gone to, I've been to like almost 30 or something at this point. I always try to learn, thank you, you're welcome. How do I get to the bathroom and ask for a beer? Just, little stuff. And you could just see people are like, oh, thank you for respecting me. There's a very human element to that. And so I come back to the earlier concept of reading the room. I don't come here with any expectation of anything. I want people to respect me too, but I want to show, hey, I'm respecting you first, right? And I think that's a thing that a lot of expats don't get because they expect people to speak English to them and all this other stuff. So like when you come and speak Spanish to people and you're making jokes and understanding their culture and like some of the slang, they're just like, nice man, thank you for doing that. Right. So I think that's just a level one basic thing that any traveler can do in any country. I mean, you may not learn the whole language and that may take you a long time, but know the core tenets of what it is to be a person in the world and show people that you're making an effort. Because when you do, people will respond and give you some extra help or extra credit because you took some time to show that you respect them. That's always worked well for me.
Yeah, yeah, 100% agree. I wanted to shift gears a little bit, and you had a great way of phrasing this before we started recording, which is just why abroad is awesome. Tell us, Stephen, like why is being abroad awesome?
Oh man, let me count the ways. Let me count the ways. So my first thing is so going back to like sitting in an office and like having people tell me that they'll just email me, right? Like, why am I in this office? Back in those days, they have a 2 week vacation policy, right? Or they say unlimited vacation, but if you take more than 2 weeks at a time, you're going to get fired, right? So it's just this BS way for companies to not pay you out when you leave on your vacation plan. Just in case anyone's wondering, that's actually what it is. But I was like, dude, like, why do I have to wait for these 2 weeks to go see a place and like, or wait till I'm retired to go know a place? That's stupid. I think that's absolutely insane. Like, I have my knees right now. I don't have like little ones running around. I don't have a mortgage or anything. Like, why can't I go and enjoy life and be productive at the same time? So that's number one. I think you get to really learn about other cultures and see the world in a completely different way while you're hopefully young and but you're producing. I think that's the first reason being abroad is awesome. I get to see what the actual world is like and not be locked in and just commuting on a train to an office. That's the first. The second thing is there's this little thing called arbitrage. So I'm from New York City. New York City is one of the most expensive cities on the entire planet and it continues to get more and more. And one of the reasons I wanted to leave New York is because it's not a city of value anymore. So it's expensive and I don't think the value's there anymore. What I mean by that is you don't need to be working in New York to be in media anymore. You can have a YouTube channel and be somewhere else, like, or most industries have been disrupted by the internet in that perspective. Like Joe Rogan is building a comedy center in Texas, which is super random, but he's able to do it because he has the audience and he brings people to it, right? If you can build an audience, you can do it anywhere. And I think if you can do that, why would you spend all this ridiculous money to be in one place when you can have a better quality of life at a better price somewhere else? So that would be my second is the arbitrage. The third on that is kind of part of the second is there's such a better quality of life. So you've lived in Mexico, Vance, and you said your girlfriend's Mexican. I'm from the United States, and I'm hard pressed to find most people who are like, I love being American. And if they say that, that's a divisive topic. That makes people be like, whoa, what are you saying, man? Versus here in Mexico, no matter what station of life, the poorest person on the street or the wealthiest person that you run into, they love being Mexican. They love being Mexican, and they want to share being Mexican with you. That type of feeling is so nice to just walk around. People love their culture and they're unabashedly in love with their culture and they want you to love it too. And I think that type of positive energy everywhere you go, again, it has its ups and downs like any place. And I'm sure, some of the rumors you've heard about the country are true too. But people love being Mexican here. And I love being around that energy because it just makes me happier about life, right? Some people don't have much, but they have everything because they're so proud of their life. And I think being able to see and feel that energy is addictive and has done wonders for me as well. The fourth thing I would say is being abroad and taking advantage of that arbitrage means a couple of things. One, I don't have to make an extreme amount of money to just pay my rent. I have lower costs of living, which means I can think more macro about every decision that I make. And what I mean by that, there's a book I love. I read it every single year. It is called the Almanac of Naval Ravikant. So Naval Ravikant's a well-established investor, and he writes these very pithy. This is our word of the day for the podcast is pithy, but very pithy, no-fat statements on Twitter and in his writings. And somebody has codified that into this book where he talks about wealth and business and family and happiness. And I read it every single year because it's like some advice I got or a turn of phrase is you shower every day, but you maybe take a bath every month or two. And like that book is like taking a bath. I sit and I soak and I understand it. And one of the things that he says in that book that really resonates with me in living abroad is don't work a day with someone you wouldn't work with for the rest of your life. So if I'm comparing my business life to being in New York and being here, in New York, I may have, and I probably did work with a few people I didn't really like or didn't see eye to eye with because it's like, yo, daddy got to pay rent today. Versus here, because my costs are lower, I can be like, do I like this person? Do I see myself working with this person for a long time? And if the answer is yes, then let's do it. And if it's not, it's like, I don't need this. And I think that just gives me a much more long-term approach to how I want to live my life. And my stress is plummeted as a result of it. And then fifthly, and I probably have 30 reasons, but fifthly here is the food is so good. It's so fresh. Like I believe, and if I'm wrong on this, I'm sure someone will let us know in the show notes, but I believe, at least up to this point, Mexico is still a food independent country. So they produce their own food from farms that are local. So everything here is grown or most things are grown and produced here in Mexico. So you get very fresh food from the mountains or from different parts of the country that don't have all the Monsanto trash inside of them, which is really, really dope and cool. So the food tastes different. It everything, and just what that does to your body and everything else is
Yeah,
really, really
literally
good.
tastes better.
It tastes better,
Like
right?
the
So
tomato is more red.
the tomato tastes like a tomato, chicken tastes like chicken, beef tastes like beef. Like, yeah, just all of that together is, and I think that to sum all of that up, Vance, is I have a better quality of life on every conceivable level, with rare exception, by living abroad. Because not only for the reasons I've stated, but I've also expanded my mind and my vocabulary as a global citizen to understand how the world is. And if you're an American or a Canadian, we often think that we're the only country that matters. And when you live in other countries, you realize there's a whole lot more than just that that's important to the way the world goes. So I think for anybody, it's a good thing to do, at least for a few months, and see if it's for you. And I recommend it highly.
Jeez, Steven, you're a better public speaker than me, that's for sure. If you have any more, keep going. Keep going. It sounds like you're on a roll.
Those are the top ones I got. I'll have to come back for another episode and I'll just make it about why you should live abroad.
Okay. So you said there was some rare things that weren't equal. Like what are some of the ones that people might want to be aware of as a trade-off?
Yeah, this is a good question, actually. Great question, Vance. So when I say I don't want my Brooklyn life, I mean I don't come here with the expectation it's going to be the same. So this is a difficult thing, but I think it's a good thing on all told, and I'll explain the difference here. So sometimes things just don't work as you expect them to here. So you expect things to be really efficient. Like for example, a lot of businesses here do not accept cards that are not Mexican, or you have to go and pay your bills in cash in person, or they don't work on the site if you don't have a Mexican ID or a card to use it. And you're just like, why the heck do you have it this way? And that could be annoying from a time perspective, like, oh, now I got to go down and do this. But at the same time, where I think that's good is it taught me patience in a very specific way that I never had before. So, like, you just realize how entitled, like, I could tell when someone's here for the first time because they're just, bitching about something really like, dude, that's how it is here. You got to, not saying it can't be better, and hopefully it does get better, but it's like, you got to learn to slow it down. You're not in the same place you came from. So don't bring that whole thing with you. And so that can be annoying, but you have to learn. The other thing is exchange rates can be really tough sometimes, right? So like the dollar is pooping the bed right now. So that arbitrage that margin is getting thinner and thinner, which is stressful because after a certain point, it can become extremely expensive versus you getting a deal. So that's something to always watch out for. Sometimes internet doesn't work. One of the things that I think is important to mention is like sometimes your information can get taken, like so a car gets stolen or something. I think it's really important if you're going to travel that you have as many redundancies as possible. So like my computer failed, completely bricked itself. Shout out to Apple, completely bricked itself, unfixable. But thankfully I had a second laptop. Like I had one of my credit cards got scammed, right? So I had to shut that down. I have multiple other credit cards that I can have. So I think that can happen kind of anywhere, I suppose. But the infrastructure for me to get that new card, getting it mailed and moved over is going to take way longer and have all these extra hurdles to it. Whereas if I was in the States, it would just arrive, right? So I think that can be annoying. But again, with the mentality of being further looking, you have redundancies and you have other systems in place and you learn to be more patient about it. So I think as it being a negative, it actually becomes out as more of a positive because I have more control over my mindset and my expectations around things when they're stressful.
Hey guys, quick interruption to tell you about BitRefill. BitRefill is the best way to convert your crypto into gift card balances. These are gift cards that you can spend at hotels.com, Airbnb, Nike, and many more. You may remember Joel Valenzuela, previous podcast guest. He's been living on crypto exclusively since 2015, and he's a big consumer of BitRefill. And so I asked Joel, I said, what do you like most about BitRefill? He said that he likes the instant delivery, the precise amount so that you don't have to juggle a lot of gift cards, and he loves the global selection. Nobody else has this much selection of gift cards, over 10,000 gift card options across hundreds of countries. Go to bitrefill.com to sign up. And you can also use the code MyLatinLife for 10% back off your first purchase. Go to bitrefill.com for more information. Yeah, yeah. It leads into something we wanted to talk a bit about, which is just how to make it work being abroad. And I also really like this phrasing as well. It's similar to what we're talking about, like the cons, but how to make it work is like a little bit different. How do you think about this phrase? Because you're the one that brought it up and I like it.
Mhm.
How do you make it work living abroad?
Yeah, first thing I would say is know what you're here for. So, like for me, I'm really big about my work. I love what I do. I want to make sure I can always do that first. Everything else comes second after that, right? I got good setup. It's a quiet place. If I'm taking calls and I'm working with clients, I set up my life to be able to do that as the first thing. So I would say making it work is understanding how you're going to make the thing that's going to enable you to be abroad work as quickly as possible. Where am I getting internet? If the internet goes down, where are there cafes around? If my computer fails, do I have redundancies? So try to keep two of everything that you really, really need, if not more, depending on what it is, so that you have those redundancies so that when the things do break, you have a system in place to move yourself towards getting what you need. So that would be the first things I would say to make sure it works. The second thing is make sure you have good insurance, like that you can trust. So, quick story on that. I was getting the bottom of the barrel insurance in New York, like just the cheapest one I could find, which was still like hundred, if not a thousand, like probably like $600 a month with a $8,000 deductible, right? Which is crazy money. And like I'm a healthy person, so like I'm just basically wasting money if you think about it. I got a plan here that works globally, but only works for 3 weeks in the United States for less than half of that. And I could even get medevaced out of this country back to my hospital of preference in the States. So, you know, that's just nuts. And that shows you again what the arbitrage is of potentially leaving the United States as an example. I know Canada may be slightly different, but have those things go together. And then the other thing I would say kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier with the Dynamite Circle and Dan and Ian and Freddie in these communities. Join communities that are online and offline that will give you access to people before you go there. So, like, as I mentioned, if I went to maybe it was Malta, Malaga, Barcelona, Lisbon, Chiang Mai, Thailand, I have community of people who are doing what I'm doing, similar things. They've built businesses, they've been through similar struggles, and I have a quote unquote family of sorts that I can just drop into any place that I go. And why I think that's really important of making it work abroad is you don't have to do as much work. You're always going to have to do work, but you don't have to do as much work to make friends. Because one of the big problems when I first started living abroad and traveling is any city I go to, I had to start over fresh, completely fresh, brand new, new person every time. And again, that's cool for a little while, but it does get very isolating. So having those communities and those groups of people as an asset, I can land somewhere and have friends and people to do stuff with and people to trade stories with. So you're not alone. And I think that's one of the keys to making it work abroad. The last thing I'd say on that is have people come visit you from home. And I think this is important. One, because it gives you a baseline of people you love and trust, but it also helps you see how much you've grown once you see them in a different time period. And I think because we live our life day to day, if we, like I said earlier too, you only see how it lines up in reverse. Having someone come from your, I don't want to call it your previous life, if you will, but for lack of a better term, we'll use that. Having someone come from your previous life to see you in your new life really shows you just how much work you've done on yourself. And I think that is an extremely beautiful thing to behold when you're like, wow, like I've grown.
Yeah, all very good tips. Do you ever feel though that it like what's weird about that though is they treat you the same, and so you almost have to show them you're like, no, I'm different.
Yeah, that's funny. There's a quote from Jay Z I like where like I don't remember who came up to him, but because probably someone that obviously someone who doesn't matter, but they're like, "Oh, you've changed," and he says, "As if I worked this hard to stay the same." And I think I love that because again, they treat you the same, which I think is refreshing and interesting in its own way. But I think it kind of comes back to like again, we're doing callbacks for a comedic term here. It's standing on your square. Not everyone needs to know that you've grown that way. It's nice if they recognize it, but you need to know for yourself. And I think if you're going to be living
Hmm.
abroad and moving around, like I said, owning that square, it's okay to live to have a great day out in the mountains and water parks and have a great dinner and not post any pictures about it. It's cool. There's nothing wrong with that. And I think if people treat you the same way they treated you before and you're different, that's okay too. You know that you're different. And I think that's a beautiful thing as well because not everything is supposed to be shared.
Yeah, 100%. So, have you had maybe your mom or dad come visit, brothers, sisters?
So one of my brothers lives here. So
Right.
we're growing together in that way. My parents came down to visit us last year and, they made their comments and stuff too. And, they see we're living in a whole nother country and thriving and enjoying ourselves. That makes them proud. But again, they're my parents. So they're going to, they treat us how they think we're their kids. They're always going to do that. But definitely seeing that growth and being able to share that growth experience with my brother and then talk about how things have changed with how we relate to our parents in this experience is also super beneficial. I've had a bunch of friends come down. Some of them, it's like nothing's changed between us and everything we do, which is dope. Other ones, there's a little bit more of a chasm. Again, pandemic notwithstanding, lots of people have changed over the past few years, and I'm no exception, and neither are they. It's just
Hmm.
maybe our paths have gone in a different direction.
Hmm. Yeah, I think there's something to be said for seeing is believing, right? It's one thing to say, "Hey, I'm living in Mexico City." It's one thing to come down and like really see it and get the energy and eating the taquerias and all that.
Yeah, man, I definitely agree with you there. Like super special, special place. If you haven't been here, I would add it to your list. It's a huge, huge city, incredible amounts of nature. Like you'll just be so surprised by how many trees and well manicured lawns and plants and everything else. And like I said, Mexicans love being Mexican, so they take a lot of pride in that. And the place is so clean, considering like how big and how many. There's like 25 million people here, so like the streets are swept multiple times a day. Like I don't see leaves on the floor. I don't see trash anywhere really. Like it's nuts. It's an experience to behold.
Yeah, it's fair. It is reasonably clean for with all things considered. One thread you suggested we pick up on, and we're kind of talking about it now, is dealing with loneliness. Do you
Mhm.
think that you experience more loneliness in Mexico, or even perhaps counterintuitively back in the United States?
I think I've experienced more loneliness in the United States, and the reason for that is I've always wanted to go travel and like be out and go experience new cultures. And I found, at least in the circles I was around, most people don't want to do that. They just like, oh, New York's everything. It's the best city in the world. You got to be there. We got pizza and bagels, and it's just the best city. Don't go anywhere else. And like, yeah, it's cool, but it's not the best city anywhere in the world, in my opinion. Like, there's so many other places. Like, and that comes from people who've never traveled outside of it. So I don't really think you can have that type of perspective if you haven't seen something else. So it's kind of limiting and isolating when you're like, oh no, I'm going to go spend a month in Thailand, or I'm going to go over and teach workshops in Turkey and hang out there. And people are like, why? Like, I have nothing to say to you now. Like, there's no parity there. So uh, I would say that makes it more isolating. And then versus like coming here, you start to like minds attract, right? I think that happens anywhere, but New York, I wasn't able to find those circles as readily. There's a lot of expats around. We're looking for resources. People who travel are open and they're sharing and they're giving of things because they want to be able to access that karma as well.
Hmm.
And so traveling other places, there's a expat event. People are there's a hostel, there's a thing you can go to where you can meet other people who are sharing in that experience, and that propels you into other places. So I think when you have people of much more like mind so far that I've seen traveling outside.
Hmm. I think Mexico is just a very friendly culture, man.
It is, man. It's a dope place. I'm really, really happy for it. It makes me very happy.
And by the way, we have to ask as housekeeping, what neighborhood are you living in? What's your favorite neighborhood in Mexico City?
My favorite neighborhood in Mexico City. I don't live in my favorite neighborhood. I live in Centro. Uh,
You
live in
live in
Centro.
Centro?
I do live in Centro, yeah, which is super local, which I like a lot. I'd say places I like. I like. Escandon is dope. Juarez is dope because they're still local. So like Roma Norte and Condesa are just like they speak English first to you when you go into a shop, which is just trash in my opinion. I just don't like that. They're beautiful, they're gorgeous. Go see them when you're here, but like that's corny to me. So I want to be in a more local place than anything else. So I would probably say Juarez still has that little edge to it, and then Centro's cool. There's a lot of history and stuff over here, but Escandon is dope, and then San Miguel Teputepec is also pretty cool.
Yeah. Where's Escandon again? That's like just south of Condesa?
Yeah, it's a little bit south of Condesa. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, okay. What's it like living in Centro?
it is. I mean, it's cool, man. It's very local. So like, there's a lot of events. I live near the Monument of the Revolution, so you have a lot of events and stuff that happen here. You'll like there's a casino close by. Like there's just all sorts of weird. There's universities everywhere. It's a lot of people moving around and like getting stuff done here, coming to run errands and everything else. There's like these big churches not far from where like Zocalo's like 10-minute walk. It's a it's puro desmadre, right? It's pure chaos, I suppose you to translate that. But
Yep.
it's lovely in its own strange way, right? It's like it's cool. Like it's so Mexican. I love that.
Yeah. Speaking just random thread, maybe you'll pick up on it. I remember someone gave me a recommendation. I didn't end up going, but right beside the Museum of the Revolution, there's a terrassa there with like 2 for 1 drinks, and it's like a very sick, popular happy hour spot.
Yeah, cha
Have you
cha,
been there?
terasa cha cha, something
Yeah,
like that. Yep.
yeah, terrassa, cha cha cha.
Hmm. Yep. That's right.
Have a
Like
little
blocks away, super close.
Yeah, I have a little star on my map to visit that. So, guys, a little tip out there for you.
Go check it out.
Yeah, the OG Vance, who started my Latin life, he lived in Mexico City for many years, and he lived in Centro, but he lived in a very bad part. And he told me that when he would, I shouldn't even tell the story. When he would bring girls back to his place, they'd be like, "You live here," and they wouldn't get out of the cab because
Wow.
there was like homeless people like on his street. This guy loved living in like the grittiest spots ever.
Yeah. I mean, it's I don't think my neighborhood's that bad, but uh
Probably not. I'm not saying it is. I'm not saying it
no,
is.
just
Sorry.
yeah, Central like before when I was coming here in 2017, 2018, 2019, Central was sketchy, man. Like I wouldn't go there at night. Now like there's tons of parties and people are running all around and all over it. So it's like it's got its own proper like nightlife scene that would rival any place in Condesa or Roma or anywhere. So uh, things are changing and moving around. But what I will say about the homelessness here, there's definitely homeless people here. But one of my Mexican friends says no one goes hungry in Mexico because there's always food and you can eat. I've even seen it a bunch of times. Like someone will be on the street homeless, someone from the taco truck will give them food all the time. People here eat. Like there's always enough food for everybody, and I think that lowers the sketchiness of it versus like I've been to San Francisco and I've been scared for my life multiple times by the gangs of 50, 60 homeless people like injecting drugs on the street and like just standing near the restaurant I'm trying to go to or right in front of my hotel. Like it's not the same way here. Like it's a very different type of vibe, which I'm
Would you
grateful
say
for.
you feel safer in Mexico City than in New York City?
I haven't been in New York in a number of years, but definitely safer than San Francisco by miles. San
Yeah.
Francisco is the most. I've lived in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. I went to favelas all the time. I've been all over Peru and Ecuador. I've been in Nicaragua. I've been all over Mexico. Like I've been all over Latin America. The sketchiest place ever by far, where I felt most unsafe, is San Francisco Mission District. No question.
It's interesting. And I imagine that now, as you've seen kind of how things have developed in the US, just kind of post pandemic, just in terms of like rising prices, things are definitely getting a little bit more dangerous. It kind of provides a little bit of confirmation bias or just outright confirmation that you've made the right decision moving to Latin America.
Yeah, I would say so, man. Like I'm going back to the States in a few weeks. It'll be the first time I'm like spending like proper time there, like at home with my family and everything else, which I'm super excited for. But seeing it on the news, again, like God bless America first and foremost. It just doesn't seem like there's anything unifying the entire country at any point here. It's so divided, and every single thing is a political statement. Whether you want to eat a bagel or you want to have a burger, like people just can't be people anymore. They have to take a stance on every issue, and I think that's kind of eroding what I think makes America a beautiful country. And so I said this earlier in the pandemic. I think the most American thing I could have done was leave America at that time because I wanted freedom and I wanted to be able to express myself and not be locked into certain
Mm.
things or be forced into certain ideologies. And I think I'm not saying that doesn't exist here, but I think because I'm a foreigner, there's certain insulation from certain topics and situations, which I'm grateful for because I can just go and live my life. Everything's not a political statement, and I enjoy that.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, we'll get to wrapping up the episode. Things might be slightly out of order, but so you're doing sales coaching, right? And are
Mhm.
I it's totally out of order, but I just want to ask a couple things. Do
Ask
you
away,
work
man.
with a specific type of industry, or is it kind of industry agnostic?
It's somewhat agnostic. So I mostly work with B2B, so business to business. I work with founders of companies, whether that's consultants or venture backed founders of software companies. And then I sometimes work with sales teams of companies that have built sales and then want to have clearer process. And I work with them through some of my frameworks. I do something called context selling, which is where I help review people's sales calls and then grade them
Hmm.
because AI can't do context. So it can give you all these outputs, but it doesn't tell you what to do with them. You need a person for that. And I'm that person.
This is cool. Let's talk about this for just a minute because we'll kind of uh, go in fading into maybe just how maybe you might want to show your services or lead people publicize your services, but um, how do you evaluate someone's sales call?
Yeah, great question. So generally speaking, there's a framework or a model that I've created. I call it OCGC, which stands for open, create the gap, and then close. Right. So a good sales call creates an an opening, and what I mean by an opening, it's establishing all the expectations. Why are we here? What are we going to talk about? And then setting up what the next steps are. Right there at the open. Right. If everything works, we're going to book another time to talk about how this can work for each other. And then the creating the gap is understanding where they are, where they want to go, and then why they don't currently have that outcome they're looking for. Once you've created that probable gap, then you can then start to create the conversation around solving for that gap. Right? Remember, solve, don't sell. So
Hmm.
here's where you are, here's where you want to be. You don't have that because these three things are in the way. This program I offer is specifically designed to build systems that address those three issues. Do you want to learn more about it? And now they'll be like, yeah, of course I do. If you've done your right thing. Again, there's more nuance to it, of course. This is a short version. And then you would close them for the meeting or whatever the next step is because we've opened, created the gap, and then closed the gap with a potential offer that resonates with the people. So the OCGC model is a good sales call model.
Yep, yep. And so where do people go wrong in implementing this model?
Most people freestyle sales calls, right? So I always say freestyling is for skiers and for rappers. You need a, yeah, got you to laugh. Ooh, nice,
Yeah.
right? But people think that by freestyling it and just kind of figuring it out as they go, it's going to work. And sometimes it does, which is really cool. And congratulations. But that's not how it works. So having some type of script, again, you don't have to follow it to the letter, but you should know what questions you really need to ask on a call and how to make sure that you're guiding people towards the right outcome. Because I've seen it happen. It's happened to me in my career as well, like much earlier, where like somebody will say something and then you go off on this huge tangent. And the next thing you know, the time's up and then you are struggling to get them back to get a meeting or whatever else. You didn't do what you needed to do. So having a structure that you can follow helps make sure that you're hitting all the beats that you need to hit for your calls. It helps
Right.
you know where somebody fell off, as in like their mood changed or they didn't you got a weird objection and you could train for it. And then probably most importantly, if you're a founder and you want to get out of running sales and you want to like train people and have great people run your company, you're going to need to give them some tools to work with if you want them to successfully work inside of your company. So having scripts and other things that you know work that you can hand someone helps them
Hmm.
be accounted for, visible, and then helps you both understand how to get to the results you're both looking for. So it's a great training tool. And generally speaking, it helps you understand what type of language your customers speak, which can help inform your marketing. It can help inform how you hire people and help how you solve and build future products later. So I think it's an important thing to record your sales calls.
Yeah, 100%. Um, and so let's say you have an organization, they're already kind of chugging on the formula. They do the opening, hey, if everything works out well, we're going to take it the next step. Do you agree? Yes, boom. And then the middle is kind of like, what's your motivation? Why haven't you implemented this yet? Why now? Where are people like semi-experienced salesmen breaking down? Are they kind of just not digging deep enough in the middle, or are they not solutioning enough on the end, or
Completely depends on the industry, on the salesperson, on the questions they ask. Mostly the things to think about are like again, there's five things if you do inside of a call, you'll generally make it out okay. Again, there's much more nuance, but if you open with a clear agenda that you're going to cover, if you understand where they are, where they want to go, what the gap is, and then if you book another meeting on that call, if you do those things, you pretty much make it through. There's some nuance to add to that depending on where people are, but most people forget to ask for a call. They're just like, oh, I'll follow up via email, and that's going to have you chasing, which is the worst place to be.
okay. And probably one of the most controversial topics in sales, where I've seen even the best guys have different opinions. Is it buy or die? You must close on this call. You must whip out your credit card, or how do you address people saying, I really want to think about it, that kind of thing?
I think it depends, right? So that's the most consulting answer of all time. But what are you selling? And then, so everybody's different. Some people, I think that's the right model, right? But that's an objection, which you need to get to the root of that objection. So, okay, I want to give you as much time as you need to think about it. Just really curious, so I know what resources or something to send to you. What's the main thing that you really want to think about? And then they'll tell you, hopefully, oh, I'm not sure if it's the right. There's three objections in sales. Is this the right time? Is this going to work? And is this just too expensive? Right. So any objection is some version of that, and you want to get that person back from the I need to think about it back into the phrase of, oh, okay, cool. Tell me really what you want to think about, and then you can readdress and handle that specific objection. Best way to handle that is with stories. That's another thing I teach. I have my first book coming out here later this year called Superpower Storytelling, which outlines the stories you need to tell to lead, sell, and inspire. So I talk about how to break objections down using some of the frameworks that I've actually answered your questions with today, and then other ways that you can start to talk through and the stories you need to be able to answer all these different objections. Stories are really good because they give you social proof. They show that you've gotten results. And then the main reason a story works is because it helps the person who's hearing a story tell their own story better. So if you're telling about results that somebody got, a quote I love is by a guy named Horace. It says, you need only change the name and you are the subject of the story. So if you got someone great results, that person can potentially put themselves in as the next person to get similar results. So that's how you'd smash objections. But what I would say is, I'm not a one call close type of person. My products are not a one call close type of sale. Again, I'll take those as they come. If your product is, then get their credit card and close it. If you're selling higher ticket stuff, I think it's all about trust. And especially if you're selling services, a person needs to trust that you are the person to do the work. And I think if you're just hustling to get somebody over the line, you're probably not setting the right type of expectation. And then further than that, if you do close them, they may not have the right attitude about working with you because they felt they did something under duress. So you want to be very careful about that and go back to another concept we covered earlier on in the call, and that is read the room. Know how much you can push someone on the objection. And the key as well, though, more than anything else, is to not need it. So Get enough
Mm.
meetings. You don't need that person to close. You want them to close. And when people know you don't need them, they're usually much more amenable to joining up, and they're not pushing back as hard on you.
Yeah, yeah. All very eloquent. I agree with everything you said. That's great. So you said you have a book coming out?
I do, man. Yep, my first one. I've been writing it since last January. I just got it back from the editor, cleaning that up, getting the cover made as we speak, and it should be out in the next, hopefully, month or two. Though I've heard summer's not a good time to release books, so we'll see. But it will be done.
Get it out there, man. I'll read it by the pool. It'll be
That's
good.
what's up. That's the only way to read it. I'm going to say that. As my friend Vance says, do not read this anywhere but next to a pool.
Awesome, man, dude. I really enjoyed this conversation. I think you did a really good job of kind of weaving between the sales and then the expat stuff, and you're just overall a joy to speak to. And I could tell you're an excellent salesman as well.
Well, I appreciate that, man. I really, really do. And thank you again for having me. And shout out to Frederick for putting us in touch.
Yes, sir. Well, do you want to take a minute and share with the audience anywhere that you would like to direct them, your website, YouTube channel, etc.?
Sure, man. So you can find everything about me on stevensteers.com. There, I highly recommend you get my presentation planning guide. It's completely free. It'll teach you how to show up to any podcast, any sales presentation, or anything where you're going to talk to a person and help you make very, very succinct points about what it is you have in a way that's going to resonate with the people you talk to, which I think is the key to building good relationships and being a good human. So check that out. I'm on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Steven Steers, STEPHEN STEERS. You can find me. It's a picture of my face. I got big hair, and to help you make bigger profits.
Whoa. Awesome, man. Love it. Obviously, we'll link it all up in the show notes. Again, my guest today, Steven Steers. It's been another episode of the My Latin Life podcast. Thanks, everyone, for listening.